Yes, yes, yes. I'm Herman Scuttle. I have a lot to say, and I'm saying it. First of all, let me tell you this. On this particular day, on this date, way back in history, to be exact, in 1906, a woman by the name of Esther William Schnitzel. Esther William Schnitzel was born on this date in 1906. Who was she? Well, Esther William Schnitzel happened to be the last surviving member of the Titanic. She was the sole last living survivor thing of the Titanic, the last one. And she passed away in 2005 at the age of 99. Okay? She actually passed away in the little town of Permafrost, Massachusetts. Esther William Schnitzel. Now, with the Titanic in mind, I will tell you something, just to give you a little perspective. If your body was the size of the Atlantic Ocean, your red blood cells would be you'd be surprised to find out that if your body was the size of the Atlantic Ocean, your red blood cells would be the size of the Titanic. That's what I'm trying to say, so let that sink in. I recently took a trip to New York City. And on this trip, 3 times I was asked for my COVID vaccination card. On the Greyhound bus, at the hotel I was staying at, and at the Beacon Theater. That was no problem for me. But my friend Sid lost his ID, and now we call him S. Right. What else do you want to know about what's happening to me lately? A lot of things. Look, I told you at the beginning, I have a lot to say, and I'm saying it. Tonight is a kind of a tense night for me. If I seem a little tense and a little off, a little fidgety, well, that's because I have a blind date tonight. I have a blind date tonight with a vegetarian, and I'm very nervous. I never met her before. There are a few news items I ought to pass along to you. News items come across my desk. I still have a lot to say, and I'll be saying it, but I want to give you the news items first. A 7-foot statue of Harambe the gorilla was installed on Wall Street. It's facing that iconic charging bull down there. Now, the gorilla is meant to symbolize that millions of people are suffering from U.S. capitalism. And the nostrils on the gorilla are especially big to symbolize that gorillas have really big fingers. Also in the news, the town of Water Valley, Tennessee is up for sale at $725,000. The population of this little town is 258, and that number never changes. Every time a baby is born, some guy leaves town. Finally, in the news here, a man from Idaho by the name of David Rush. He set a world record by catching 58 marshmallows in his mouth in 60 seconds. That night, Mr. Rush had a dream that he was eating a giant marshmallow, and he woke up with his pillow missing. Now, a lot to say, and I'm saying it. First of all, I noticed that you took your sip of coffee this morning, your very first sip, and you were thinking about what to put on today's shopping list. It's all the usual stuff: milk, bread, eggs, bananas, chicken noodle soup, hot dogs, beans, cornflakes, Diet Coke, potato chips, and People magazine. But are you forgetting anything? You take another sip of your coffee. Oh yes, soap. You're all out of soap. Bars of soap, squeeze bottles of body soap, shampoo, shaving cream, dishwashing soap, and laundry detergent. All of your soap supplies depleted all at once. Coincidence? Nah, it's more like negligence. So, you write soap at the top of your shopping list in big bold letters. Because right now, you have nothing in the house to get you lathered. Now, besides your shopping lists, I hope that you have some inspiration. Everybody needs to be inspired by something. It's important to be inspired. Now, I can tell you about my latest source of inspiration for me. Herman Scuttle. It comes from, and now follow me on this, it comes from discarded shopping lists that I pick up at the supermarket. Really? For example, I recently found a discarded shopping list as follows: honey maple ham, provolone, Land O'Lakes butter, Pert shampoo, The Big Book of Birth by Erica Lyon. That's the shopping. Look, I've got to meet this woman for lunch sometime to check out her hair and her baby bump. And speaking of lunch, I am very observant about things, and I found out that on your lunch hour, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but on your lunch hour, you took your kayak out on the pond. And hey, lucky for you, you can squeeze in some quality time paddling on the water. But on this particular day, on your lunch hour, kayak on the pond, you noticed that there was a peculiar man out fishing on the pond in his rowboat. And you knew exactly what he was thinking. He was thinking that maybe he can make you his new best friend. Well, his presence out there on the pond made the pond into a hellscape, with him ogling in your direction, his eyes all wet with lust. He had to look like he would keep you on his mind until he made you his own. This guy reminded you of all the other bugged out, psychoneurotic misfits that you attract, which doesn't mean much, because you have always been a freak magnet. I'm not judgmental about you or anybody else. I'm just here to say things. I have a lot to say, and I'm saying them. For example, local color in my beloved downtown Pittsfield. They make me feel very comfortable, and I try to make them feel comfortable as well. I was walking down North Street in Pittsfield, and I saw a man who I recognized. I know him by sight, not by name. I was walking to the front door of Walgreens, and he was sitting outside on the cement. He looked up at me and said, $2, no more, no less. $2, no more, no less. This man was in disrepair. He was broken and dirty and begging. It was a Friday morning here in the Berkshires with the breezes and the colors of fall. And he said, $2, no more, no less. Come on, help your brother here. I need $2. Well, I stopped and I leaned against the building and I winked at him and I smiled and I offered him $20 if he could tell me 3 substantial details about the future. And he didn't hesitate. He said, well, okay, tomorrow being Saturday, he said, which is the future, it's named after Saturday. It's named after Saturn, he said. Saturday is named after Saturn. You following me? Yeah. He said, Saturday is named after Saturn. It's also the Sabbath for the Jewish. And it's the day that I take a bath over at Esmeralda's place. Just me and him. Couple of downtown acquaintances having some fun, for which I paid him his earnings, which was a reasonable price for 2 happy faces. Oh, yeah. Somebody else was petitioning me downtown for money too. It was last week. And it was you. See? Okay, well, this is for you. Last week, what were you? You were reduced to being a quivering little mouse, your tail between your legs. You were begging me for money. But today you drove past me in a brand new Escalade. Hey, didn't you tell me that your wife ran off with a bistro chef? And that child welfare took your kids? And didn't you say that they fired you from your job at the post office and that somebody poisoned your cat and then your house caught on fire? You know, it seems just like yesterday you were sobbing and moaning and tugging at my sleeve, saying you had to have a few bucks fast or you'd wake up dead or dying. You said, please, Herman, please, please, this is an emergency. I'm at the end of my rope. You suckered me for a nice taste of my bank IRA. And now, oh, well, now you're driving a Cadillac Escalade. And like magic, your damp, stupid prune face is looking all smooth and smart. Well, hooray for you. But I intend to spread the word about you. I'm starting a campaign to bring you down, pouring scorn on your name. You know, I'd like to say that you're a sleazeball or a slime bucket or a deviant crud. But I'll save my breath and just call you a really bad guy. Yeah. Yeah, it's people like you that make it hard for the next wretched soul who might deserve my soft touch. You want a song? Can you handle a song? All right. Ba-da, ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da, bam, ba-da, ba-da, ba-da-da, ba-da-da-da, bam, ba-da-ba, ba-da, ba-da-bam. I went down to the crossroads. I looked north, south, east, and west. I went down to the crossroads. I looked north, south, east, and west. I said, Lord, we need a roundabout. This crossroads is a mess. Well, I also in my travels, I met a woman at the convenience store, Cumberland Farms, okay? And I was right behind her at the dairy cooler, see? But she was standing at the dairy cooler undecided. She couldn't decide whether she wanted whole milk or 1%, the quart or the half gallon. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw me behind her and she said, oh, am I in your way? I said, no, take your time or just hand me a quart of the low fat. Well, that made it worse for her. I mean, trying to pick the right milk for herself and having to help me out too. So I just turned around, moved away. I got some toilet paper and a newspaper and a box of tea bags. Then I doubled back to the dairy cooler and I took my milk. Now, this woman was already at the checkout counter and the cashier was asking her, you want to pay cash or credit card? That's another thing she had to decide about. She couldn't decide. Well, she started to count her money and found out she didn't have enough cash. Then she checked for her credit card and realized she left it at home. Well, I edged in front of her and I paid for her things and my things and I left her in a daze. I don't know this woman. I don't want to get to know this woman. But that night, I had a vivid dream about her father. And he said that she was from overseas, Germany, I think he said. And he tried to convince me that this woman and I would make good life partners together. He said, give her a chance. And he winked at me and he squeezed my shoulder and the dream ended. And it was 3:00 in the morning. And outside my window, I heard somebody singing. It was her. She was singing, Deutschland, Deutschland, über alles. My instincts told me that I should ignore this woman from now on. But I must say, she bears a striking resemblance to her dad. Uh, Look, here's something. Here's something that it's personal, and I don't recommend you get involved in this kind of thing. It involves me having to fire my shrink. This is just me. I don't recommend this for anybody. But I did have to fire my shrink. And I'm not bragging about it either. There should never be any excuse for you to fire your therapist. But I did it. I let him know that we were through. No more appointments together. Two men in a cramped office. Me, the one who needs the therapy, and him, the licensed clinical social worker. His name? I don't mind telling you his name. His name, Roland Everrude. Okay? Now, first of all, I require a woman shrink for my psychological treatment. 50 years of getting help for my mental vulnerability. Yeah. I've almost always had a female professional. And most of the time it's been good bonding. And there's never been more than 50% testosterone during the 1-hour sessions in these close quarters. And sometimes if I've been feeling extremely emasculated, there may be no testosterone in the room at all. But the woman in the room always makes the most sense. Not so with two men in the room. This shrink, the one I just fired, Roland Everrude, well, he was the only shrink available after my previous shrink moved out of town. She went to Milwaukee, I think. Or maybe it was Albuquerque. Might have been Wichita. I forget shit. But I hated to see her go. You know, I remember her name was Suzanne, but she called herself Fran, and everyone knew her as Corky. Anyway, this unspectacular creature who replaced her, this Roland Everrude, yeah, he smelled like cigarettes and garlic and aqua velva. He was bald and disheveled. He had a lopsided goatee. He wore a Metallica t-shirt. He had a habit of dozing off during therapy time. And he had an obsession with calling me in the middle of the night for help with his crossword puzzles. The final indignity of all this was when I was explaining to this guy how depressed I was. He was picking his nose and wiping it on his pants. Disgusting little weasel. And I fired him right on the spot. So now I have to wait for a new LCSW. Has to be a woman or nothing. And until then, I'm reduced to telephone fantasies with my old acquaintance, Mistress de Sade. It's not ideal, but it is 99% testosterone free. Well, I'm almost out of time, but I'll tell you a couple of news items that just passed my desk. Okay, I'll wrap it up with that. Some news items that just crossed the wire. As of now, the oldest living man is 112-year-old Saturnino de la Fuente Garcia. He was born in 1909 in Leon, Spain. When asked for a comment on his longevity, Mr. Garcia said, "Well, it's pretty much the oldest I've ever been." Also in the news, a first edition of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein recently sold for $1.17 million at Christie's auction house. But the real story has never been published. Dr. Frankenstein actually entered a bodybuilding contest and misunderstood the objective. And finally, in the news, researchers are potty training cows so that their wastes can be collected and treated to reduce ammonia emissions. The cows will also be taught about bank accounts where they can make direct deposits. And that slams the lid on this edition. I'm Herman Scuttle.